Live. Um,
Awesome.
all right, Kyle, welcome to the Ryan MTV podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Definitely. And we are recording live here on Substack. I write the Ryan MTV Substack, and you write the Built on Bike Substack. But yeah, Kyle, why don't you introduce yourself and yeah, tell us how you would describe yourself in this world of bikes.
Yeah, so my name's Kyle Dawes. I am the author of the Built on Bikes Substack. You can find that at builtonbikes.cc. Um, so what I do with my Substack is I essentially write at the intersection of cycling, business, and development within the United States. I kind of started the Substack about a year ago now, really just wanting to get into the cycling industry more. And as I started writing articles, interviewing people, I quickly realized that I'm very interested about kind of like the business and the money behind cycling, whether it be brands adjacent to cycling or how teams function or how brands function. I find that very interesting. And then the other topic that I found to be very interesting and also kind of like inspiring for me is the developmental side of the sport in the United States. I think, as we all know, there is not great developmental pipelines right now in the US. It's kind of few and far between. Everyone kind of has a different journey to becoming a professional cyclist. And I love exploring ways that we can kind of standardize that and hopefully get more pros produced out of the United States.
Totally. Um, and let's start at the beginning. How did you get into cycling originally?
Yeah. So I was not a lifelong cyclist. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and lived there until I was 22. And throughout that whole time, like I didn't cycle. I had a bike, kind of like anyone would, and maybe ride around town a couple of times, but by no means a cyclist. And then once I moved out to San Francisco, YouTube was kind of suggesting videos to me of like, oh, here's like these cool cyclists like Safa Brian, like whoever it may be. And I kind of got that seed planted in my brain of, oh, this could be a cool activity. And I knew I wanted a really cool outdoor hobby after moving to San Francisco. So I was kind of working at a job that I wasn't like a huge fan of, but one of my coworkers, he was a cyclist and he was telling me about, all of his adventures. And then I told him like, oh yeah, I watch these videos. And he's like, dude, how do you know about these people? Like if you're not a cyclist, I'm like, I don't know. The algorithm just suggested it to me. And then he convinced me to buy a bike. And after that I was hooked. I spent kind of like my first year of cycling just getting into shape. I was definitely out of shape when I started. And then the past 2 years, I've been training really heavily for doing gravel events and gravel races, things like that. And then over the past year, I knew I was so obsessed with cycling and spent so much time like researching it and just like consuming media around it. I wanted to get more involved in the industry and get to know people and build a community. So I started Built on Bikes, and it's been a pretty wild journey considering it's not even a year old yet. Kind of the opportunities that have come in from it are insane, and I definitely feel like I already have a great community in cycling, and it's been awesome.
Yeah. And sort of the side of like researching and writing, like, do you have any training in that, or just like how did you get into wanting to write?
Yeah, no formal like training or education around writing. Like I majored in music business and entrepreneurship in college, so I kind of definitely had this creative side to me, but it was more on the business side and thinking about how you grow a business, grow a brand, things like that. And I enjoyed writing in school, so I knew it was like an outlet for me for sure, but I had never trained in it. And the way I got to, deciding that a Substack was the right way to go, I was speaking with Craig Dalton, who I'm not sure if you know, but he is also like in the gravel cycling media space. And I was kind of asking him, what are like ways that I can break into this industry and kind of like share my opinions. And he said, you should just start either a podcast or a newsletter or something like that. Just start making content, and if it resonates, like people will come. You obviously know a lot about cycling or are obsessed with it, and he's like, believe it or not, you know more than most people just by being that big of a fan. So I kind of took that advice to heart, started the Substack, and yeah, I am kind of surprised by my writing at points. Like people compliment it a lot, and I'm like, I'm really not like a professional writer or anything, but good to know that my writing skills are showing through, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And you have a like full-time job as well. What do you do for work?
Yeah, so my full-time job, I work at this company called Standard Metrics, and we're a software, like AI software startup selling our product to venture capital firms. So it's kind of funny how well my like day job and then the side gig of writing Built on Bikes like play together. Lots of VCs are into cycling, and I've actually, I think, increased my job performance by like focusing so heavily on cycling now. It's an easy way to connect with people that we're trying to connect with in our business. So it's actually helped me a lot on that front, as well as when I'm writing these articles on the business side of cycling. A lot of these VCs have connections to whoever it might be in the cycling industry who can give me that background on the finance side of things. So it's kind of interesting how the two jobs play in tandem. But yeah, Built on Bikes is definitely just a side gig that I'm doing on my own out of the passion of it.
Yeah, yeah. And what impresses me the most about your articles is just like how deep you go on the business and like economics and finance side of it. Like to be honest, some of it I don't even understand, like the heavy numbers and statistics, like parts of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, these articles are like they read like you could like be doing this for brands, which you kind of are in your day job.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of just have this obsessive personality of poking holes in everything that I write. So I really want everything I write to be backed up by research. I'm slowly getting better at being comfortable with kind of writing more opinion pieces where it's like, oh, this is my opinion. Like I could totally be wrong here. But when I'm writing about a brand or a subject that has numbers behind it, I definitely want everything to be backed up in fact. So I'm not like misrepresenting anything or misrepresenting brands. So I do try to go as deep as possible, and kind of having like the tools at my disposal at my current job to, pull up the financials of these companies that might not be widely publicly available, using like tools like PitchBook and stuff. I can find these financial reports and go deep on it. So I think it's something that a lot of people might not have access to because PitchBook's like a very expensive software to use. So I try to utilize that as much as possible.
Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Do you have a favorite article that you've published so far?
Ooh, that's a great question. There's so many cool ones that I've done. I'd say my favorites are when I get to connect with someone and actually interview someone and dive deep on stuff. Some that come to mind when I started the newsletter, like one of my favorite athletes, Sarah Sturm. I think she's so awesome, and I was like, it'd be crazy if I like got to interview her one day, but I have no idea what I'd interview her about, how it would tie in with like the narrative of my newsletter. And then as I started exploring collegiate cycling more, is like, oh, Sarah Sturm became a cyclist because of collegiate cycling in Fort Lewis College. So I kind of interviewed her about that experience and really highlighted how important it is to have collegiate programs like Fort Lewis. So that's definitely one of my favorites. Interviewing Veronica Ewers, who's former World Tour athlete and top 10 in the Tour de France Femme. That was really cool, kind of like talking about very important topics around rider health and how, that doesn't get discussed nearly enough. And if we're not addressing it in our developmental pipelines, there will be more like unfortunate stories like that. So that was actually really rewarding and also just cool to meet Veronica. And then most recently, I did a deep dive on human powered health. That was by far the deepest I've ever gone in an article, is about a month or two of conducting interviews with their executive team, really diving into the product, their mission, market dynamics, things like that. So I really enjoyed that process, and it was really rewarding to finally put that one out because that was a huge amount of work for me. But those are definitely some that come to mind.
Yeah, yeah. With the human powered health one, like first off, like what got you interested in that company specifically?
So they actually reached out to me because I had written more of like a think piece on, what the perfect AI training tool might look like. Because right now, all of our training tools are kind of disconnected, and you have to make all these integrations. Like you use Strava, you might use Fuel In, you might use Training Peaks, like all in tandem, and you're paying for 5 different things for your training. And I was saying how it would be cool that if someone built an app that it's all in one, it takes all your training data, puts that into nutrition, puts that into coaching, puts that into like virtual training, whatever it might be. And I was saying, there's not really anything like that right now to my knowledge. And then Human Powered Health reached out and said, hey, like, we actually think we cover a lot of these things that you do talk about. And it was definitely an oversight on my part. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to chat. And they really explained how between their performance labs, where you actually get hard data on whether it be like your VO2 max, whatever, you get this hard data and then they plug it into their AI models, and you can use the Human Go app to kind of build training plans, plan nutrition, things like that. Is very interesting and a very comprehensive platform. And it goes way beyond, performance training for cyclists. They have this whole mission to redefine like metabolic health in the US and the world. So it's really cool hearing how they're starting with top level athletes and then hoping to take that data and those learnings and apply it to the general population.
Yeah. And they're cycling sponsor. So,
Yeah,
um,
the women's world tour team, which is actually having a lot of success right now, which is cool to see.
yeah, totally. And so what's your research process like for an article like that? Like, sounds like you're doing combination of like interviews as well as digging into data and all that.
Yeah, so that one was definitely my most intensive. That was like a month and a half or 2 months of sitting down with their executive team and conducting multiple interviews, as well as them sending me over materials that kind of give me more background on the product and really like the technical side of it. I'd say my normal research process for an article, I I won't lie, like I'm pretty like by the seat of my pants on like these articles. Like I basically write them week of and come up with the idea week of. Only when I'm like interviewing someone will I be like reaching out in advance to set up an interview or something like that. But I kind of just have this running list of ideas, and I've gotten into the cadence of just doing it week of, which can be pretty stressful at times. Because I'm like, oh shit, I have to get this out on Friday, and I have a busy week at work. I'm gonna be up all night writing this when I could be doing something else. But I've gotten good at that cadence, and I'm used to it and pretty comfortable with it now. So that's really what my research process looks like. It's just a lot of late nights cramming information after a full day of work at my day job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of the same way, like definitely kind of, I don't know, like I go in like spurts, like an hour or two here, just like super down the rabbit hole, and then pause for a little while and then go back to it. So yeah, I think that's like similar to a lot of writers and creative people.
Yeah, it can be hard to find the motivation when you're just like in a few week long span of just like writing articles, and like you're just pumping out content, like quality content, but like you're kind of just like heads down on it. But you get like such a energy refresh when someone like reaches out to you and says like, oh, I really like resonated with that article, or a brand reaches out, or you make a new connection in the industry. That like fuels me for like the next 3 months off of that like high of like, oh, like this actually resonated with someone. So it can be pretty hard at times, but yeah, having those little moments makes it worth it. And I never like have a doubt about like my
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Totally. And this next question is sort of like maybe putting you on the spot a little bit, but do you have like a main theme that's sort of come out of your research and writing so far, or like one big takeaway that like cycling brands or the industry should know or follow?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is just like the potential for cycling in the US. I think a lot of people have a tendency to say like, oh, road racing is dead in the US, like cycling's never going to be a mainstream sport, whatever that opinion might be. I think people just aren't thinking creatively about the problem and the stories that can be told within cycling. One of my stories was about why the Tour de France Unchained Netflix series failed. I don't think they were telling the story right. They were focusing in on one race, focusing on riders within that race, and not covering the full context of, what these riders go through in a season, their personal lives, things like that. I think American audiences would connect a lot more if you presented the sport in that way, and then also start thinking about, how do we brand the sport creatively? Like last week, I wrote an article about putting cycling brands where they shouldn't be, whether that be a cycling clothing brand developing more like streetwear clothes and like having a high profile athlete from another sport where that people will see that clothing brand and look it up and be like, oh, this is a cycling brand. Like cycling can be cool. Um, I think it's just, yeah, really getting creative with it. And then also realizing that creating better developmental pipelines is going to be a huge part in like that success. Like people want star athletes from the US, and like that's how a sport grows, is when you have those star athletes performing at the highest level. So like obviously I think our last like real example of that was like Lance, whatever your opinion of Lance is, like that was like the cycling craze moment in the US, and then it died off after everything that happened. So we're only going to get the next Lance if we develop more athletes and actually discover this talent, because right now cycling is a niche sport. So if we change that, we'll definitely have another Lance or our own Tade or something like that. Those would be my huge takeaways.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And that's a good segue. Just talk about development. You were out at Unbound Gravel last week. So yeah, what were you doing out there?
Yeah. Um, I was trudging through the mud like everyone else, but with a camera instead of a bike. But I was fortunate enough to go to Unbound this year with the Mach 1 Devo team, which, if anyone's familiar with Nina Machina, that is her Devo team that she started. I actually met Nina at Sea Otter. I was asked to feed a collegiate athlete um, at Sea Otter in the pro race. So I was at the feed zone and randomly just ended up next to Nina, and we started chatting, and she found out what I did, found out that I also like take photos of races, and she asked me, are you planning on going to Unbound? And my answer was, I'd really like to, but I haven't found a place to stay. And as you know, like finding a place in Emporia the month before Unbound is nearly impossible. And I didn't really want to get a place to stay like an hour and a half away. So I was like, it's kind of up in the air right now. And she said, well, I have a Devo team and we have an awesome host that hosts us like basically near downtown Emporia. Would you want to stay with us? Just come like take pictures of us. And I said, you've got yourself a deal. Like, absolutely. So I bought my plane tickets and went out to Unbound. And then I've been getting media credentials from Lifetime for their races, so I also had that going for me. But that's how I ended up at Unbound, and I'm so glad that I ended up there with her team. They're an awesome group. They have super talented riders, and it was just really cool seeing that side of the sport. And I think like being able to tell a little bit of that story this week and next on my newsletter is going to be like really rewarding and also like high value for that team. So I was really glad I was able to attend in that capacity.
Yeah, that was awesome. Or that is awesome. And funny story about that. I was writing a like preview for the under 23 category for Unbound in the Grand Prix. And I was like noticing like all these riders, like three or four or five of the top under 23 who were on Mach 1 development team. And then I saw you were involved with them. So I was like, oh, that's like serendipitous. So yeah, definitely curious about that team
Yeah,
and program.
yeah, they crushed it. I don't know their last names unfortunately, but I know Oscar on the team. They're still like finalizing like the U23 like results. I'm not sure what's going on with Lifetime on that, but we're pretty sure Oscar will be leading the U23 standings in the Lifetime Grand Prix. After Unbound, he got second in the 100-mile race. Like standout performance from him. And then one of their female riders, Brooke, she actually rides at Fort Lewis, and kind of like Sarah Stern, only got into cycling when she went to Fort Lewis and discovered there was a cycling team. So she hasn't been like in the sport that long, but I believe she got seventh in the 100-mile race and is around seventh in the U23 standings, which is incredible for someone that's like pretty new to the sport. So their riders had standout performances. Obviously, like I literally just called it Mudbound. It was such like a weird year because of the rain, and it was definitely like a mud year. And seeing those athletes handle those conditions was really impressive. Like her team did really well with that. I think a couple of riders DNF'd, which looking at the field, like it's incredible. Only a couple DNF'd because of mechanicals or whatever. It was just like such bad conditions. I was impressed with how the team handled it, but yeah, she has a knack for finding really good riders. All of the riders have great personalities as well. Like they truly operate as a team and are really close as a team, which I'm not sure you can say for other Devo programs. I heard stories from her athletes saying like, "Oh yeah, there's other Devo programs where it can honestly get toxic and it's like unhealthy competition between the athletes, whereas at Mach 1 they were actually operating as a team and generally wanted to help each other and help each other succeed." So it was really cool to see how she's fostered that team dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, what else do you think like makes them successful as a team?
I think the fact that Nina has like a performance background, um, and like physiology like background, being able to like help coach her athletes and give them, solid coaching plan. She really does develop these riders from a skill standpoint. And then I think they do have a lot of awesome sponsors that Nina has been able to bring on, like Louth, Flow Formulas, Bike Tires Direct. So for like a Devo team, they have some pretty high class like sponsors behind them, which I think is kind of rare. You don't see a lot of Devo teams. Like obviously now you see like Envy Mog Squad and stuff like that, but historically there just wasn't a huge presence of Devo teams in U23 gravel cycling. So I think she's done an amazing job with that. And then just the opportunities she gets them to race are incredible. Like she gets them out to all the Lifetime Grand Prix races. I believe they're going out to the Rift next month in Iceland. She does a really good job at like helping the team travel and making it possible for them. So I definitely think it's like all the work that she puts in behind the scenes. And then, yeah, these riders being super dedicated and following her training plans and really just operating as a team is their big key to success.
Yeah, and so it looks like they're like mostly focused on gravel and um, like marathon mountain bike as well.
Yeah, from what I gather, I'm actually interviewing Nina like properly like next week to like iron out all these questions I didn't get to ask in Emporia, but mainly like an off-road team, and their riders all have like off-road or mountain biking backgrounds. So I'd definitely say that's their strength as a team.
Cool. Yeah. Like broadening out a little bit, and a bit of an open-ended question, but like, how do you think gravel can like play a role in like development? Like, do you think there's like chance for crossover as like using gravel as development for road, at the world tour level?
Yeah, it's a interesting question that I've explored a lot on my newsletter, and I get varying perspectives on it. One of my first pieces was with Alexei Vermeulen. I interviewed him and was talking about, you obviously do a lot of work with development and gravel. What's your goal behind that? Like, do you think you're developing riders in gravel so they can later go on to like road racing in the world tour? Or are you like specifically focused on gravel? And he was very much of the opinion of, I don't think gravel is going to translate how we want it to the world tour. So I think we're developing athletes to have a career here in the US and pro gravel, and really trying to develop that ecosystem as an option for kids so they don't have to go over to Europe by themselves and kind of be miserable while they're on some European development team where they're away from their family, they don't really know anyone, they don't speak the language. It's just like a brutal process. as far as my opinion on it, I'm still I'd say I'm still on the edge. I definitely think we can develop some athletes in gravel that would translate really well to road. Like if the talent's there, the talent's there. And I hear a lot of people talk about, you don't get like the pack dynamics in like US gravel, like you don't know how to move for a bunch, like like using the wind to your advantage, things like that. I get that, but I also think riders kind of just figure that out naturally if they truly have the talent. So if someone's a really strong gravel rider and shows high race IQ for like gravel races, which are becoming ever more tactical, I don't see the harm in putting them in a road environment and seeing how it goes. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work and they go back to gravel and be a pro and they gained a lot of experience going over to Europe and racing with the best. I also think like USA Cycling is doing a lot on that front of analyzing what makes a good competitive cyclist, whether it be on the road, the track, mountain bike. They are investing a lot into like their technology team that uses AI and other tools to like analyze a rider's performance potential. And I think the data shows that there's potential in riders that you might not expect. Like right now, Kate Courtney is racing on the road in hopes of getting on the US road team for the Olympics. She's a mountain biker. That is like the opposite of road, but she just won a road race in Europe in a sprint. So obviously the talent is there and she's able to navigate that. Obviously she's been in the sport for a long time, but I think that's kind of proof of concept that yeah, if the talent's there, the talent's there.
Yeah, totally. And you definitely see, like, I think definitely the World Tour teams are like paying attention to gravel. Like, I don't know if you followed the sport back when like Colin Strickland was a big figure winning Unbound. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he had discussions with road teams, and Keegan Swenson had discussions with road teams like a couple years ago. And like both those guys decided not to stick with gravel, and like the benefits of privateer running a privateer program. Um, but yeah, I think like on my end, it's almost like created like a new development path and like a third option for people. Because like you before gravel, you had like the sort of like road scene, and that whole pathway, and then you had mountain bike, which you have NICA, and like going on to development team, going to UCI races, all that. Which I think like the mountain bike side of it is pretty fairly healthy these days with like NICA getting people into the sport, and then we've got like good U.S. national series of races, and then more and more like World Cups happening here in the States and North America. So that seems pretty solid. Or you can like now you can go into the third option, which is gravel, which it's sort of like democratized it a bit, but I also think it's maybe confusing for young athletes. Like, what path do I chase? And I
Yeah.
think now maybe like road is the weakest link, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I agree completely. I would say that I've talked to a lot of U23 athletes and kind of picked their brain of like, oh, what's your decision making process when you decide to like choose gravel over road or something? And a lot of these athletes have a lot of self awareness and say like, oh, I know I'm much better at off road events, and it's very obvious that right now, if you want to make a career in the US, like gravel is the way. Like that's the clearest path to like making money to be able to support yourself and have a pro career. So you are seeing more and more athletes like decide that that is the viable route for them. Um, how that will change, I don't know. Like obviously the sport's becoming more and more professional every year. Like this year we saw the specialized team at Unbound. Like, yeah, I don't think any like young riders are going to be coming in and beating them. Like that's full on professional team. Um, as for road being the weakest link, I think that's where collegiate cycling comes in and plays a huge part in development. I think for most athletes at that age, like they'll get their road experience racing collegiate. And right now, the ecosystem just isn't strong enough. And I think that's because collegiate cycling is a club sport, it's not an NCAA sport. There are varsity programs, but it's still at the club level. Um, so I think we need to think about collegiate cycling strategically here and find people to invest financially in it to hopefully make it an NCAA sport. And I think that will give it a lot of credibility to people that might not have thought about cycling previously. Because having that NCAA title really brings a lot of weight to a sport. People are used to seeing football and baseball and basketball. The NCAA is like the developmental league for future pros. So why shouldn't it be like that for cycling? I think once we get that title behind it, more and more big name schools will develop cycling programs, and that will become a legitimate like sport for kids to consider in like high school that they might want to go into if they're not going to make a collegiate track team or collegiate rowing team or something like that. Like cycling is an option because those skills transfer over pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Your yeah, whole series on collegiate racing so far and like NCAA was super interesting to me. Like as someone who has been in the collegiate system, like as a collegiate mountain biker and all that, like my first reaction was like no, we shouldn't have NCAA. And I think it's because like that would add like so much more like regulation and bureaucracy to it. Like NCAA would be like the UCI,
Mm-hmm.
and like that everybody would hate it, you know?
Yeah, when I was talking to Sarah Sturm, like I definitely asked her that question, like, what do you think the reaction would be? And she said, back in the day, the main opposition was riders have their own like personal sponsorships, and before what's the name of it? Whatever the
NIL.
Yeah, before NIL, I completely escaped my brain. Before NIL, like if it became an NCAA sports, all these riders wouldn't be able to keep their sponsorship. So everyone was very happy to keep it at the club level. But now that NIL is a thing, there shouldn't really be any like opposition to it. Like it would still be sanctioned through USA Cycling. Like the rules wouldn't really change. It would just have this new label to it of being an NCAA sport. And then you get to have NCAA championships on top of, like USAC championships. So it's just like offering these riders more ability to get seen and have standout results and more races that are like quote unquote like priority races. So I think that there shouldn't really be much opposition these days. And talking to the director of the Fort Lewis team, he agreed. Like, I don't think there's like any big opposition at the moment, as long as, yeah, there aren't like all these new regulations that don't make sense, but we don't get the sense that that would be the case if it became an NCAA sport.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point with like the NIL and sponsorship and all that. I think the other big question mark in my mind is like how you would get like schools to invest in it, because it seems like all the schools want to invest super heavy on like football and your traditional sports, and they're also like dropping more niche and like Olympic sports. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that end of
Yeah,
it.
I definitely do have thoughts on that. There's no way like skirting around that. Like that is just the reality. Schools aren't going to want to pay for it. And I am a bit of a dreamer in that sense. I think there are so many wealthy individuals that are passionate about cycling that we truly could convince people to invest and basically start these programs out of sheer will. Um, yeah, they're not going to be seeing like a financial return in any sense, but they'll see a return on like having a legacy and impact on cycling in the US. And I've already talked to USA Cycling at length about this. I was actually having a conversation with their chief of staff yesterday about, there are so many VCs that are into cycling and have like all this disposable capital that could be investing in development, things like that. Like, how do we get these people together and really convince them to invest in these things? So we were having conversations about that. And I think it really just comes down to pitching cycling the right way and connecting with people's emotions. And people, if they're an alumni of a school, like say you have someone that went to, I don't know, UCLA, and they really love their alma mater and they don't have a NCAA cycling team. Well, if you have the capital to start it up, that could be like the legacy that you have is starting that team. So I think that's how we approach it. And then, yeah, I just take hope from other things like watching the Walton family in Bentonville invest so much money into making that town a cycling town. It's obvious that if people are passionate about the sport, they are willing to part way with their money if it has an impact. So I also point to that as a guiding beacon of hope.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, you never know what's going to happen. Like, I think, yeah, with like Los Angeles 2028 Olympics and yeah, mountain bike world championships being here in Durango in 2030. Like, yeah, cycling's going to get a lot of hype, and hopefully, I think what we're all hoping for is more mainstream attention for cycling, all disciplines of cycling. And like we were talking about earlier, like if we can have like a more mainstream figure in the sport, like the new Lance Armstrong, so to speak, then yeah, maybe NCAA and colleges and universities would be interested in bringing
Yeah,
cycling aboard.
and I think there is a clear path to having our next breakout athlete, and USA Cycling, I think for the most part agrees with me from like everything I've heard from them. The answer is pretty straightforward. Our next like Lance Armstrong is going to be a woman. Like our women's cycling program is so strong and they win so many medals and perform so well that like yeah, that's our answer right there. Like we can be the dominant nation in women's cycling if we really put our mind to it and we have the talent to back it up. So I think USAC like plans on doubling down on women's cycling and investing there, and I think that that's a huge goal for them going into the LA Olympics. Is like focusing on the women's program. That's where they want to win most of their medals. So I think that that's kind of the go-to strategy there.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I think totally agreed on that front. I guess, yeah, just starting to wrap up here. You just published an article like right before this on some like takeaways from Unbound. Um, and yeah, I'm just like looking at it right now. One thing you have in here is you said Unbound is not even close to its ceiling. What do you mean by that?
I think looking at the streaming numbers this year from like the live stream, um, Ryan Cross, who's the head of partnerships at Lifetime, he was kind of like talking about it on LinkedIn of, we had over 500,000 or close to 500,000 people tune in to watch the race. And at any given time, there are about 20,000 people in the stream watching. If you think about an NBA arena, the average arena is like 18,500 people. So we are averaging more people than an NBA like arena, the whole live stream. And that was an 11-hour live stream. So that was like kind of like proof of concept that like people will tune in. Obviously, those streaming numbers are nothing compared to an NBA game, like not even close. But we're talking about off road cycling here, which is a pretty niche sport. So the fact that 5 years ago there wasn't even a live stream of the race to now having that, I think shows like incredible growth. And I think kind of like the demographic percentages that you saw this year, only 23% of the participants were women. And that's like such a huge like growth area for cycling in the US is like more female riders. I think that that number is only going to go up and up. So Unbound still has a lot of room to grow on that front and increase participation and increase demand. And then, yeah, I think you saw this year with all the high class pros showing up from Europe and all over the world that it's just continued to be taken seriously. And I think if we pitch that correctly, we could one day see Unbound streamed on a service like HBO Max. I know there was recently the first like UCI gravel race streamed on HBO Max, and it had Wout Van Aert in it. I think Unbound would top that. I honestly do. I think people would be more interested in seeing people absolutely suffer in muddy conditions and do this insane feat of endurance and skill rather than basically a road race, which is what UCI gravel feels like sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, it's sort of counterintuitive, but I think there is like a lot of audience for these like long live streams. Like I watched basically the whole Unbound stream, which part of it's like my job as a journalist to do that and know what happens. But I'm like nerdy enough to like want to watch like mile 20 of Unbound and see the
Yeah, and
attacks going.
I think a big part of that is like the commentary. If you look at the commentary on the Unbound live stream, it's nothing like you would hear watching the Tour de France or something like that. It's not nearly like as analytical. Like the announcers know these athletes, they start talking about the stories of these athletes. You get invested in, how they got to the race, and they admit that like they might not have all the answers on the live stream of like, oh, this rider's like falling behind, like we don't know what the case is there. Whereas like at the tour, like they're just gonna stop covering that athlete and not talk about them. So I
Yeah.
I think the different broadcasting style is really a strength and appealing to American audiences at least. It's a lot more easy for like the average person to connect to that, and it's like, oh, I don't really know that much about cycling, I don't have to know all the lingo, they're kind of like explaining it as they go. Whereas if you tune into the tour, you have to kind of know what's going on already, they're not explaining it for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting point. I also think I've like, yeah, tuned into some live streams from the ultra running world, and tons of people watch those, like Western States 100 and Cocodona recently, and those are like even longer than gravel races. So
Yeah,
the
and yeah, I think looking at trail running in general, like not to like go on a different tangent, but I think trail running and off-road cycling have a lot of overlap, and you're seeing more and more off-road races, like gravel races, adopt trail runs on top of them. And that's like just increasing the amount of people that come to these races. And then you have these runners seeing gravel cycling, thinking that's cool, having gravel cyclists see trail running, thinking that's cool, and you get more overlap in people joining both sports. So it's definitely an area that we should explore collaborating with, because trail running is seeing an explosion right now.
Yeah, totally agreed. Cool. Well, this was a great conversation. What's next for you, Kyle? Any big summer plans?
Yeah, there's definitely stuff in the works. Stuff that I can't really talk about yet, but had a really interesting conversation before I hopped on here to chat with you. Um, Trying to get out to some more races this summer in some cool locations. Just pitching some people on that. But as far as like later in the year, we'll definitely be at Gravel Worlds in Nebraska. I obviously like Nina's team has ties to it through Louth. I know Holy Spirit of Gravel, Lenny will be there. We love collaborating on stuff. And then like the sign up platform used for it, Movement, is great. So I definitely want to be out there with all those people. And then at the end of the year, want to be at Big Sugar again because that's a great race to go to and just great vibe all around. So I'd say those are like the big plans as of right now, but hopefully more exciting stuff to talk about soon.
Nice. Well, if you make it out to Leadville, I guess Leadville's like the week before Gravel Worlds, I think, but
Yeah, I
I'll
think
probably
so.
be at Leadville. So maybe see you there.
Leadville's on the bucket list for sure. One of these before too long, I will be out there for it. So don't
Nice.
worry.
Any events that you're riding yourself?
Um, Kind of up in the air. I might do some shorter events. I wouldn't say I'm in race shape right now. I haven't been able to dedicate as much time to training as I have the last 2 years, but we'll see. Might try to participate in Truckee Tahoe Gravel at the end of this month. It's a great race, brutal course, but I'll do the shorter distance so I don't absolutely suffer like I did last year. But yeah, that might be one that I participate in.
Nice. Awesome. And yeah, people can find your stuff at Built on Bikes on Substack, and I think on social media as well.
Yeah, I don't have a social media page for it, but you can definitely follow the newsletter. It's just built at bikes dot or built on bikes.cc. That is also, if you want to reach out to me, you can email me, Kyle at builtonbikes.cc. Very easy to reach and always willing to talk to anyone about cycling. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, thanks again, Kyle, for doing this live chat here. Um, and yeah,
Yeah,
have a
thanks for
great
having me.
rest of your Friday.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks, man.
Bye.